Hello, I'm Jen Johnson, the Digitization Consultant and Ohio Digital Network Project Coordinator at the State Library of Ohio, and today we're going to be talking about the who, what, when, where, how, and most importantly the why of the Digital Public Library of America and their connection to Ohio and the Ohio Digital Network. Starting at the top, what is DPLA? The Digital Public Library of America is not a physical location. It's a nonprofit and a website. You can find them at dp.la through any mobile or desktop browser. They are a portal and a platform that link over 40 million digitized items to anyone with internet access who wants to use them. They're free for anyone to use. There's no card required. There is no account registration, and they just keep growing in size. Why did the DPLA come to exist? Well, much like urban planning of years before, we thought that highways would connect us, in this case information highways, but in many cases they have actually created divisions that are difficult to traverse. They have perpetuated the problem of silos that we've dealt with in our physical locations in our buildings. You know, if something's on a website, it's great that it's out there for people who know that it's there, but for those who don't know, it's just the same as the building that they can't access because they don't know what's in the building either. So no silos. That's what we're working against here with DPLA. Where do those 40 million items come from? They come from cultural heritage institutions all across the United States. That means museums, archives, special collections, public, academic, and government libraries at the state and the federal level. You can see a map here from DPLA. These are all the locations that they're working with so far, and some are in process, with the goal to complete the whole map and have items contributed from institutions in all 50 states. Who's DPLA for? Well, it is for educators. There are special K-12 tools that have been developed for use, whether you are homeschooling or supplementing projects or in the classroom as a professional educator as well. It's great for genealogists, great for lifelong learners. We know libraries have a lot of those coming through our doors every day. Also, they're great information primary resources for scholarly researchers and, surprisingly, for developers. Lots of API tools and cool tech features that developers can get into as well. Well, what's in DPLA? If you can think of it, it's probably in there. We've got images. That includes photographs, flyers, handwritten letters, maybe things like digitized menus from prom or high school reunions, and all sorts of photographs you can think of are included in there. We've got text documents. That includes government documents, and moving images like video clips, sometimes news clips, sometimes, videos of a local hometown parade. You'll find it in there. There are also digitized scans of physical objects. This would be like 3D art objects and artifacts that are in a lot of the museums that we have here in the United States. And also sounds like interviews, oral histories, and even recorded songs. But there are some things that are not in there. No one site can be everything to everyone. They do not have physical items to lend. As we mentioned earlier, it's not a physical building. There's no physical items to lend. There are no large runs of newspapers. You might find like small school papers or newsletters or some historic community newspapers, but nothing like Columbus Dispatch or Cleveland Plain Dealer. There's plenty of other places to find things like that. There's no theses and dissertations. This is not a storage facility for that kind of scholarly work. And there's also not going to be anything that's locked or requires a subscription access. As mentioned earlier, DPLA does not require any of its users, which is really just anybody who comes to the site, to register or have a card, and they want to make sure that that continues with the resources that are linked on the site. So nothing that you would need to register or pay for, nothing with a paywall, and that sometimes comes up when you get to like research journal articles or paid services that you need a subscription to, like Ancestry, so nothing like that. How does it work? Well, there is no transfer of items or ownership of those digitized items or the physical items, the copyright to those items, or even the license to those items. The magic of DPLA is in the metadata, and we're going to go into this a little bit more later with a couple more slides. And that's the only thing that's linking DPLA's site and the local collections in those cultural heritage institutions. So let's go down a little bit further here in our view and focus on Ohio. What is ODN? That's Ohio Digital Network. And Ohio, being the contemporary and ancestral territory of the Shawnee, Miami, Seneca, and Wyandotte peoples, today we know as Ohio, and we've got centuries of history to share from indigenous, native, and settler cultures, and we're sharing that right now as part of DPLA. We've got an Ohio Digital Network website. You can see the URL there with some information for institutions who want to be contributors, which we'll be going into detail for that too. And we've got over 250,000 items in DPLA already. We are Ohio's DPLA hub. This project is coordinated at the State Library, but was developed over a couple years with the work of many, many folks from institutions and organizations and their support from across the state, planning it to make sure that it would work for any institution and any Ohioan who wanted to use the service. And now we get to who is ODN. ODN is administered at the State Library of Ohio, again supported by many others who will be meeting here in just a few minutes. But as we have been meeting virtually and having a lot more phone calls and emails and not meeting in person as much, it seemed like a good idea to include the faces of the people that you have been working with at the State Library. You can see myself here in the upper left-hand corner, Jen Johnson, over at the right, Penelope Shoemaker, our metadata librarian. Lower left-hand corner is Peter Kukla, our IT specialist, and in the bottom right is Evan Struble, managing both Penelope and myself. He is the Assistant State Librarian for Library Development, and he also works to manage this project with us. In the center of the slide here, you'll see the true stars of the project, the map of our 25 contributing institutions, currently contributing institutions to Ohio Digital Network. And who else supports us? Well, it's not just the contributors, and it's not just the staff at the State Library, as mentioned before. An executive committee meets biannually to advise and review the progress of the project at large, made up of representative leadership from major cultural heritage groups in the state. We've got 4 DigiHubs, which you might have heard about in other work if you're doing digitization projects yourself. These are basically digitization centers at the Cincinnati Public Library, Cleveland Public Library, Columbus Metropolitan Library, and Toledo-Lucas County Public Library that are equipped with an amazing array of technology, all kinds of scanners and equipment. It varies slightly from location to location, but they've got wonderful staff at each location and amazing equipment, as mentioned, and are available to support any organization in their region, kind of immediate area that needs their help. So you can always go there if you have questions about digitizing your content. We've also got some community engagement centers, representation from academic, special, and public libraries. We meet quarterly for information sharing and feedback, just to keep an eye on what's going on with digitization and project needs in the state. And we've also got a wonderful outreach working group who has worked on a couple of great projects in the past and looking forward to some more in the future, doing outreach to both libraries who might be interested in contributing to DPLA and patrons who are interested in using it. You may have seen some of our work published recently as primary source sets. Those are listed on the Ohio Digital Network website, and some of our marketing that's gone out as well, and they're really great. They did a great job on those. So moving on to the contributors, you can see a list here that I'm not going to read through of 25 contributors, and there is no collection too big or too small. We've got the smallest collection right now is 42 items from one specific library all the way up to 119,000 items from another, and there's no way that you can break the system. And you can see here it's a pretty good range of sizes and geographic locations and even library types, which is great. We love to have that representation from all different. So let's go ahead and go back to DPLA for a few minutes and just take a tour of the site if you're not familiar or if you haven't been there in a while. It's recently redesigned to include a couple of neat new features. This is the homepage. Again, the URL is just dp.la, pretty easy to remember and bookmark. You can see there are some navigation tools across the top. We've got a single search box like a lot of our patrons are used to. And right here, we've got, when the screenshot was taken, I think it's actually more now. We've got 42 million items. I think they're top 43. And there is no advanced search if you're looking for that, but you can use the faceted searching in your search results after the fact, which I know a lot of librarians and patrons are fully used to that and comfortable with that feature. DPLA has developed a couple of guides on their site for how to best use it, how to utilize the features. You can see here they've got guides for educators, family researchers, again, as I mentioned earlier, lifelong learners, scholarly researchers, and developers. It just goes into a little bit further depth for the needs of each one of those groups. They've curated some really amazing exhibitions. There are over 30 digital exhibitions, almost like you're walking through a museum yourself on foot, where you can see relevant and really fascinating material that's been pulled from contributors all across the country on specific topics. You can see just a couple here. These 8 are a very wide range, and they can be cited and used for homework and scholarly assignments as well. And speaking of that, we've got our primary source sets. These were developed by educators, teachers, and there are over 140 of these now, actually, with all different types of subjects. You can see here, you can sort them, you can choose a time period, you can also choose them by subject. They each have little subject headings below the descriptions too. These are mainly designed for K through 12 classrooms, and they do include some further resources here. You can see this is an overview of the United Farm Workers and the Delano Grape Strike. You can see who created it, you can see the time period, you can see the subject it covers very easily. You can see that link to cite it or even share it to Google Classroom if that's a tool that you're using. If you were to continue to scroll down, this is obviously just a screenshot, but if you were to continue to scroll down, you'd see all these thumbnails. And again, this is all content that's pulled from many different libraries, which really demonstrates the value of a site like DPLA, where you can pull from that rich collection and not just one place, because we know that these physical items, for very good reason, got distributed as part of sometimes preservation plans or sometimes just coincidence or sometimes just borrowing and not returning, but they're all able to return to this one centralized location to be utilized by whoever needs to know about labor history and working on their U.S. history maybe. So how do these items get into DPLA? Who really owns them and who manages them and who takes care of that process? Well, again, DPLA does not own these items really ever. They're just sharing that content. Metadata, as we mentioned before, and something known as OAI PMH, which is the Open Access Initiative protocol for metadata harvesting, basically just kind of a specific language that computers and software can speak with each other to be able to communicate back and forth and share that metadata. As long as a collection has that feature added to it, which many digital collections do, then it's able to be shared with DPLA. DPLA does not own or hold the rights to the items on the site, and that metadata links the collection to the site, and then as we'll see in a few minutes, people who are looking at the items on DPLA, if they want to get more than just that thumbnail, if they want to look at the whole thing, get the context, see the whole collection, they're going back to your library site or whoever the contributing library site is to see more about it. The metadata that DPLA uses is what's known as CC0, Creative Content 0, and Creative Commons 0, and these are licensing terms. Licenses are different from copyright. We don't need to get into a whole legal analysis, as A, I am not a lawyer, and B, that's not the exact purpose of this particular webinar, but the Creative Commons licensing system allows creators of content to set their own licenses. And so in this case, the libraries are creating a set of metadata for these items to be shared with DPLA, and it's set as shareable, which means zero licensing is shareable with the public and can be shared back and forth between DPLA. And this metadata is collected by the hub, whatever that looks like in your region. In Ohio, if you're listening to this, you are going to be part of the Ohio Digital Network. We'll do that work. And then quarterly, in Ohio at least, our metadata is harvested and added to DPLA's site as it is. So moving on a little bit further into the metadata, and Ohio's metadata application profile, that's what that MAP acronym is for. We've got, again, the wonderful Penelope Shoemaker, who can support any questions or work that you're doing with your metadata. The metadata requirements, as we know, librarians really like to standardize things. We appreciate the value in standardizing things. Other people like to do it too, but when it comes to metadata, it's really specifically librarians who are usually working on that. And metadata has what are known as elements to it, and those are kind of the categories or the subjects or the topics within the metadata itself. If you're not a cataloger, that's probably the broadest way to describe it, that you would use to describe an item. And so we want to make sure that the information that's being shared with DPLA is pretty standardized. So we have 6 elements that any collection or item is required to share and required to fill out before sending to DPLA, but most of them are already part of your digital collections. And so we try to make it really easy, keep the bar really low. The first one is going to be the collection, which, let's say you have maybe a postcard collection or a stamp collection digitized that came from the estate of Mr. Peter Grimm. Well, then you probably already have that labeled in your digital collection. So that's great. That's one down. The data provider is going to be your organization, your institution. So, you know, your town library is the name of the data provider, and you've already got that identified too, probably. Is shown at is a fancy way to say just the link and where the collection is. And you've got that too, trust me. The preview in this case is basically usually a thumbnail, like a smaller image. We'll see an example of that in a little bit. That's something that's actually automatically generated by the system, so you don't have to worry about that. The standardized right statements, this might be new. We're going to go into this a little bit later, but that's something that basically identifies the copyright status. So we know that's great, so that people who are looking at the items know what they can do with them. And then we've got a title, and you know, usually if you've already got this digital collection, or if you're creating one, you know the collection that it's in, you know where it's coming from, you know where it lives. The preview is automatically generated, and you've almost always got a title on there already, you know, like Peter's postcard from the time that he went to Miami Beach, or Peter's postcard from the time that he went to Las Vegas. So that's something that's very easy, and that's up to you to add to your metadata. So let's go over the standardized right statements a little bit. This is a project that was developed shortly after DPLA launched a couple years ago. It's an international standard. It actually was Digital Public Library of America, Europeana, and a couple of other international organizations who worked on this to standardize, not to be too repetitive here, but to standardize the rights, the copyright status of digitized items with a very concise statement that's easy to communicate and easy to understand. Again, so that people who are looking at these items online can very quickly see what they can and can't do legally with those items. And you can see here these 3 little markers. These are icons. These are the 3 categories, and they all have little sub-statements to work with the nuances, but it's pretty easy. You've probably already figured it out. The first one in the upper left-hand corner, in copyright. Middle one, no copyright. Lower right-hand corner, we're not sure. We try not to use that one too much. We don't want to just throw up our hands because we don't feel like doing the legwork to figure out the copyright status. But sometimes, try as you might, you really might not know, and that's okay. Just labeling it is the important thing, right? And this is very easily added to your metadata with a URI, a little bit different from a URL, but they're in the same universe. So if you're familiar with one, you can easily work with the other. So let's see what right statements look like in action. This is a search result for an item that we saw earlier in the presentation. This is an image of a cemetery share certificate from Worthington Libraries, the Walnut Grove Cemetery deed. And you can see actually there's that little thumbnail too in action. That was automatically generated. We've got the title here, and we've got this blue button below it that says View Full Item. That would link you back out to the Worthington Library site. But right below that, you can see no copyright in the United States. Super easy, very clear. That is at the top of the results page. And as you scroll down through the metadata and you're getting the fuller details of the title, where it comes from, maybe the date, maybe the location, any other information that Worthington Libraries included on this record, you're going to see this text that I've got here copied in the lower right-hand corner, the full copyright statement. You can see a link that goes out to more information about it, but you can see this is very official legal language that, that communicates very clearly what that copyright status is. All right, so as mentioned before, probably the biggest question would be why you would want to be in DPLA and why you would want to be a part of the Ohio Digital Network. Well, there are a couple great reasons that we can go over now. Number one, I think probably is accessibility to your items, being able to share your items. You know, to paraphrase a great statement that I heard from a librarian up north at one professional development conference, we share stuff. We want to increase the use of that stuff, and we want to see it end up in the hands of people who are just as excited about it as we are. You will be working with a national project. Again, remember that map we saw earlier. DPLA is working on a national scale to coordinate and collaborate efforts for cultural heritage work and digitization support for collections across the country. Again, collaborative support from DPLA, but also within the state. You know, you've got the folks at the State Library of Ohio who are working on this project to support you and the work that you're doing with your digital collections. And we've also got the DigiHubs, we've got the committees and the outreach groups and the working groups, and a lot of people are very invested in this project because we really value it and want to make sure that it succeeds. Going a little bit deeper into that support and outreach, you can see just a couple of examples of that here. The DPLA is listed as a resource in the Ohio Web Library, a feature that is put together by OPLIN, Ohio Public Library Information Network. You can even have a little plugin if you use EBSO Discovery Services to have the results show up in your EDS. We've got social media accounts that publicize collections and items. We've got a blog that publishes a little bit of background information on the collections we like to feature as we harvest them. And we've even got the support of the State Library. We've got, this is a press release here that we've got. You know, we want to increase the use. Right now there are 40 million items overall in DPLA. And if you were just to search for the word Ohio, which is just, you know, subject, keyword, whatever it could be in the results, you're actually going to get over 830,000 items. And as mentioned before, just items contributed from Ohio, which wouldn't even necessarily have Ohio as their subject, because even though Ohio's great, not everything that we have contributed is necessarily about Ohio. It's only 250,000 items, which is a lot, but it's definitely not 830,000. So you can see that leverage and that power that come from being part of that national project, leveraging that physical distribution from years past and those nationwide digitization efforts. So we do try to make it easy. We do want the work to be easy for you, and we do want to share the information with you as we are going through the years. 2018 was our first year. It was actually just part of a year that we had participation in DPLA, and you can see here some historical and current actually data. This year in 2021, we actually are projecting to have over 30 contributors total by the end of the year. Our usage has only been for January and February so far, so that's pretty low. That middle graph there is cumulative usage through the whole year. And you can see that we've also been increasing our total items on DPLA over time, and even with only one harvest done for 2021, we've already added 20,000 items, so we're pretty excited about that. So how does your institution, how does your organization get to DPLA? I will refrain from singing the How to Get to Sesame Street song here, and I do want to emphasize that there is no cost to participate. Your institution will sign a contributor agreement, which basically just says, we want to participate, we understand there's no charge for this, we are going to share our metadata with you, we are going to choose what we want to share. You don't have to share everything. You can pick and choose what you'd like to share, as I said, as long as it's compatible with that metadata standard, and we can help you with that. And if you choose to remove it at any time, or if there come any problems with the collection that come down the road, that's fine. We can take it out too. That's all covered in that contributor agreement. You go ahead and select your collections, and this includes items that are already digitized, or if you're planning future projects, we're certainly available to help with curation of those. We know there are always more communities and work and histories of the peoples of Ohio that we want to share, and the work that they've done over the years. You know, as time keeps moving forward, we just keep making more and more history. We can't help it, right? We've got that metadata application profile again. We're here to support you with that and just make sure that those 6 elements are included. And then if you want to add extra data on top of that, then that's even better, you know, locations, dates, things like that. And we've got staff to help you with that. And then the last step in the process after all those are done is that we work on that harvest. And again, that's what the administrative staff at the State Library and Ohio Digital Network does. We work with DPLA, and in Ohio that is quarterly. You can modify as needed as well if anything does come. So thank you so much for sticking with us through this today and joining us. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact us. We've got a contact form and some contact information on the ohiodigitalnetwork.org site. You can also follow us on Twitter at Ohio Dig Network. That's really more highlights objects from items from the collections that we have, but certainly you can send us a message that way and we'll get it too. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions, please let us know. We look forward to working with you.